All right, what's up, everybody? We are on iteration number 18 of the Eleventy Changelog, and we haven't had one for about a month, so there's going to be a lot of content in this one. And the reasoning for that was we just shipped a new sort of larger feature in the Eleventyverse called WebC, and I'll kind of go into that a little bit later. But right out the gate, we want to do the Eleventy Community Showcase, Open Web Docs, a new site that's really dedicated to maintaining the MDN web docs, and has a bunch of different sponsors that are helping out with that. So it's a really great initiative. I really like this one from Osvaldo. He shared a really great site that's actually on greenpeace.org. So Greenpeace is using Eleventy, which is kind of cool. EdgepointLearning.com is using Eleventy. The Horror Review.xyz is a news site built with Eleventy. It's a great site. It reminds me of the Rural Juror. I don't know if y'all are aware of that reference, but we'll just move right along. Incredibly difficult thing to say. Transloadit.com is a new site that is shipped with Eleventy, and thanks to Transloadit for becoming a gold sponsor as well. Eric Mickelson, new website built with Eleventy. MaxBergstrom.se, built with Eleventy. Tyler.camp, which is a really great site that has just a long list of images of what seems to be childhood drawings, which I thought was kind of cool. It's chrisdiaz.com, zaps.app, which is a very fun domain name to say. Depony.me, both Eleventy. MelanieRichards.com actually had a blog post about their website redesign that they just shipped. It's a really great looking site. I would recommend checking it out. It's got some nice light and dark modes, and the color scheme here is great. StudioFoin.com, built with Eleventy. ALDR.blog, built with Eleventy. Lynn Fisher put out this. She does a regular series called singlediv.com. You can check it out, but the entry for October 9th was the Eleventy Possum, which I thought was awesome. You can check out the code for that. Josh Vickerson, new website built with Eleventy. Emily Leatherman, which is my sister-in-law. Her site is built with Eleventy. Showcases her art. Stellato.io, which is a personal site of Bartolomeo Stellato, a professor at Princeton. Plus-equals.art, which is an algorithmic art zine from Rob Weichert. It's a really great site. I would recommend subscribing to this as well. Frontendstories.com, built with Eleventy. Daniel Saunders launched their site with Eleventy with this great blog post, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Jamstack. You can't go wrong with a blog post that starts out with that cover image. Vadim published their new site built with Eleventy and shipped it with a short blog post about how they're trying again to do an English-speaking blog. Great to see Vadim blogging. I really liked the sort of very subtle color shift here on this site. Go, go, Kilo Tango. So check that one out, built with Eleventy. Bradley Burgess, built with Eleventy. Waywoo.me. Looks like the Eleventy base blog, so it's good to see folks just getting some MVP blogs going, and getting your site up is really more important than having an amazingly perfect site. I recommend just getting that MVP launched. If you've had trouble shipping, just get something up there. COVID-19-Today, which is a coronavirus statistics site built with Eleventy. QMacro.org, personal site for developer advocate at SAP. Sharon's.site had this really great blog post about why it took them years to build their own site. A migration blog post about how they moved to Eleventy. I really liked this incredible website, 4-Concept. It has a bunch of very nice animations and transitions. I would recommend checking it out, built with Eleventy. London's Node.js user group, a new site built with Eleventy. The LincolnHighwayJournal.com. I think it's a travel blog, which is kind of cool. I don't know if I've shared this one before, but the employees at the Atlantic have formed a union, and their site is built with Eleventy. I really like this site, 100.jinjinsun.com. Some really great examples of face swapping, classic art. I have no idea how to pronounce this, so I won't try, but bulle.quebec. This site is built with Eleventy. Buckley Sitzman, I believe it's a legal team. New site built with Eleventy. Ookla.com, this is a kind of an older one, an older Eleventy site, but I don't think we highlighted it on our built with Eleventy showcase yet. This was passed to me verbally. So Ookla.com, and they maintain the speed test site. So if you've ever used speedtest.net, you've used an Ookla property. Ookla. Semantics.dev, which is a new site from Ben Myers, and it's their Twitch stream. So I really love to see this upcoming stream on November 1st. You can check out Evan Sheehan talking about WebC on this stream, so definitely check that one out. All right, and now for the community resources portion of the changelog. Just to start out, this Chris Kirk Nielsen blog post about pre-compiling assets in Eleventy. We went kind of back and forth on the best approach here. I think we originally started with a double build approach, and I think we settled on something that's a little bit better to cache JS min output. So we wanted to do a JS minification step using a filter. And yeah, we settled on a nice caching solution here that's at the bottom of the post. So if you check out this post, definitely read the quick update here. Aaron Gustafson published this really great blog post about how they're handling link rot on their Eleventy site using the Wayback Machine. I thought that was really great. Brian Robinson published Eleventy plugin blog tools. So if you're interested in some more extensive tools for your blog site in Eleventy, check that one out. Bryce Ray has a bunch of blog posts here. There was one sort of revisiting the Eleventy fetch utility, which really allows you to cache remote API requests locally on your machine, so you're not hitting your API, your remote API a bunch of times, and it really helps with performance as well. Alexander put up this really great blog post about Eleventy serverless and how to do hybrid rendering with Eleventy. So with one page, you can actually do build time and serverless templates at the same with the same source input file. So check this blog post out. Bryce came in with another post about using Git commit information inside their Eleventy project. Eleventy was actually featured on freecodecamp.org with this great post from Gerard. Thank you, Gerard, for putting that up. Yeah, it's a great resource for learning Eleventy from a beginner's perspective. Brian Robinson has been sort of building in public this Eleventy plugin to do dynamic categories. So if you've been struggling with multi-layer pagination, I would recommend checking this plugin out from Brian. Stephanie Eccles has a Eleventy Sass skeleton starter project. So if you're using Sass, I think it's a really great starter project to check out. And Stephanie has been keeping it maintained. If you've been wondering how to do citations in Eleventy, especially if you're using citeproc.js, I would check out this plugin. It's a really good way to cite your sources, which is great. The LA County Metropolitan Transit Authority, the LA Metro, is using Eleventy. Published this starter project just to do quick prototypes and simple websites. ZeroPoint is not a new starter project for Eleventy, but it is very well maintained. So Michael Delaney has been issuing updates to this, including a serverless search example. So if you're looking for a good long-term maintained starter project for Eleventy, I would check this one out. Another blog post from Bryce Ray, how to do cache busting in Eleventy. If you want to do SVG sprites in Eleventy, I would recommend checking out this Eleventy plugin SVG sprite. I think it issued a new version very recently. In fact, 6 hours ago. So check this one out. And another update to the CSS browser support package, which also has an Eleventy plugin that's included with that. So if you want to publish CSS browser support tables on your blog, which I think is a really cool idea. You can do that with this plugin from Stephanie Eccles. I really like the idea behind this RSS manufacturer utility. Allows you to build RSS feeds from existing sites that do not publish an RSS feed, which I thought was a cool idea. And it is built with Eleventy. Matthias Hack put up this post building a marketing landing page with Eleventy. Check that out if you're working on a marketing team and you're using Eleventy to build your marketing site. I think there's a couple of very good points in here. Sean C. Davis has a post about binding JavaScript events to Eleventy. A couple of different approaches here. Check that one out if you're looking to add more interactivity to your Eleventy site. I really like this demo from Jeff Rich, one of the maintainers of Svelte, about how they're using Island, the Island custom element that Eleventy has published, to do partial hydration in SvelteKit. So I really think this is a hugely beneficial example of publishing code that is server-side framework independent, and how a lot of different server frameworks can get benefit from decoupled utilities built in this way. So I really love to see this, and this kind of made my week when I saw this demo. Yeah, seeing Island in use outside of Eleventy was great to see. I'm going to go ahead and plug my own blog post here about adding components to Eleventy with WebC. We'll kind of go over some of that a little bit later, but I did a talk at the Eleventy meetup about this, and then distilled that talk down to a blog post on my site. So if you're interested in WebC, if you've kind of heard about WebC, this gives some historical context to the inspirations behind it. The video for this talk is not yet up, but I'll update it I'll update this post with the video once that is shared. imschultz.com has a great blog post about using Notion, the Notion APIs, to populate an Eleventy site. Another great entry from Evan Sheehan. They built this entire microsite with WebC using the WebC Eleventy plugin. I thought it was a great example site. And now they're publishing recipes to it about how to use WebC for different use cases. And one of the most recent ones was using WebC layouts with layout chaining. So yeah, I would recommend checking out this site if you're interested in WebC. I think it's linked up from the Eleventy WebC documentation on eleventy.dev. So yeah, I think this is a great, just very early example of a site built with WebC. Robert McGovern put up this blog post about the chain of events that happens when they finish a front-end mentor challenge. I think they have a nice CI chain of events that happens that does some multi-step publishing, which is kind of interesting. So check that out. Finn Becker, they shipped a plugin that was basically very similar to the Eleventy View plugin that has sort of existed in the wild for a while, but they've added some additional composition API methods that can be used inside this plugin. So inside your View single file component in your script setup element, you can now use the composition API, which will populate things from the Eleventy data cascade or JavaScript shortcodes or the CSS that comes back. So I think this really adds a very interesting layer of functionality on top of the existing official Eleventy View plugin for View 3. If you're using the Eleventy plugin for View 3, I would recommend checking this one out. I did want to mention this website builder that Morton DK is working on called Saga 11. I would recommend checking that one out. And Leo Rosema has this really great example of generative SVG art with Eleventy, which I thought was kind of cool. Raymond put up a blog post about their experience using WebC, which I think was pretty positive. So definitely check that one out if you're interested in a very beginner's perspective to WebC, sort of very fresh eyes. I know as an author of the WebC code base, it's very interesting to read a beginner's perspective on the plugin. So I think this style of blog post really helps inform the strengths and weaknesses of WebC generally. So I would love to see more of these sort of very first experience blog posts that can really shape the future of the framework moving forward. And Evan Sheehan had this massively useful, very comprehensive introduction to WebC blog post on Eleventy.rocks. So I would recommend definitely checking this one out for anyone that is interested in WebC. I think it really gives some unique value perspective on what WebC brings to the table, independent of some of the other JavaScript frameworks. And I think this is a great, it sort of provides some great context about WebC's place in the larger ecosystem. So definitely check this blog post out. I've linked it very prominently from the Eleventy.dev WebC documentation. So I would recommend this blog post to everyone that's interested in WebC. Check it out. All right, so now the streams and podcasts and video resources plugs of the episode. Ben Myers was on FS Jam talking about Eleventy, which was great. I kind of mentioned earlier that we did an Eleventy meetup talk on WebC. The video is not quite up yet, but I do have that blog post that's sort of talking about the history of WebC and sort of the inspirations behind it. I was also on Nick Taylor's livecoding.ca talking about WebC, so if you want to check out some of the highlights there. And then Kelvin Omershone, we did a stream about sort of an introduction to Eleventy, and there is some new WebC content at the end of that one as well. I think that happens around the 1 hour mark. So if you're more experienced with Eleventy and you want a little bit more background on WebC, definitely skip to the hour mark. Demetrius Clark had a new JS drops about third-party integration with Discord. So check that one out. Sean Wildermuth put up this new video about static site generation with Eleventy, which I thought was great. Ryan Robinson, again, probably talking about their dynamic categories plugin, two-level pagination here. So if you want a video resource on that specifically, definitely check out this on their channel, the Brian Robinson channel. Brian Robinson also does the 11-second Eleventy playlist, so you can check that out. And they had another great entry on pagination and an entry on next and previous collection items, so the filters around those. And just a small plug for Jamstack Conference, which is coming up, Jamstack Conf in November. I think it's probably 3 weeks away. There is going to be a really great panel about how open source software is out to end the framework wars, and how really we're starting to see a lot more cooperation amongst framework authors. And I kind of highlighted that a little bit with Jeff Rich's Feltkin example, and how Eleventy is really trying to build as much stuff in a framework independent way as possible, really providing decoupled utilities. And I think you'll start to see that trend more as framework authors see the value in providing larger value outside of their sort of smaller ecosystems. So yeah, I think it's going to be a great conversation. I can't wait for it. All right, and now the Eleventy core portion of the Eleventy changelog. We had a couple of great milestones happen in the last month. We hit 4 million NPM downloads, which is just incredible. We put up a little video on that. So yeah, just thank you everyone for the support. Yeah, just nothing but gratitude. Thanks y'all. The other arbitrary base 10 milestone that we hit is 13,000 GitHub stars. I know Eleventy is kind of underrepresented on GitHub stars specifically for whatever reason. I don't know why. But we do, if you go onto Eleventy's GitHub page, you can kind of see that we're represented very well in this section. If you look at the used by section, we have like 48,000 different projects using Eleventy, which is just unbelievable. But yeah, we don't really have as many stars as I feel like represents the in the wild usage of Eleventy. But yeah, we hit 13,000, which is great, and I can't wait to see where it goes next. So we did ship a new canary of Eleventy core to try and fix some edge deployment stability issues. It has a new Eleventy layouts event. You can use JS functions on the before pagination callback now. And we did do a cache default fix for custom templates. So if you use custom templates and you've had trouble with the templates being too sticky in the past during watch and serve mode, hopefully you'll see some improvements there. So we shipped a new version 2 of Island, really kind of settling on relying on template and the template element for sort of lazy loading or on-demand loading JavaScript and CSS, so any client-side templates that you want in Eleventy. Previously, we had added independent features for that, and it was just, they were unnecessary when template can do the same thing. So we stripped those out, really doubling down on template for those use cases, and shipped a 2.0. Really the big thing that happened this month, and the reason why it's taken so long to do another Eleventy changelog video, is that we've been sort of heads down on WebC. We shipped it as a framework-independent HTML compiler for web components, so you can do single-file web components with it. You can do, it gives a great SSR story for web components that I think can very uniquely handle the nuances that you need to handle when doing progressive enhancement, and the tension that can happen when you are trying to manage both progressive enhancement and server-side rendering. It's definitely easy to go all in on server-side rendering, and I think a lot of frameworks are going down that path, but that really doesn't represent real-world use cases where we need to have first-class progressive enhancement support in our components. I think WebC can handle both of those use cases nicely. So we did start a new Twitter account for that, for WebC. It's WebC_components. I know Eleventy has a weird underscore in it too, and we're just keeping that trend going. So then we also have this lovely typography-focused logo for WebC moving forward as well. So if you're interested in keeping up to date on more granular releases and granular features, I would recommend following that Twitter account. And on top of the framework-independent WebC package shipping, we also shipped the Eleventy WebC plugin. So that integrates WebC as a first-party template inside of Eleventy, which really offers some very unique things in Eleventy that we maybe didn't have before. So when you're using WebC, you'll get full incremental builds. You'll get per page CSS and JavaScript bundles. You can do server rendered web components, which is the main benefit of WebC. And you can do global components as well. So you can put any WebC file inside of a components folder, and that will be available throughout your project. It works great with the Island partial hydration plugin, and you can use Eleventy template syntax inside of it as well. So if you really like Nunjucks, if you really like Liquid.js, you can still use those template syntaxes inside of Eleventy WebC specifically. And we shipped a crash course video on that, so that came out about 3 weeks ago. So if you want just like a bare bones introduction to the Eleventy WebC experience and how to start building components with Eleventy WebC, I would check that one out. And we also ship documentation for WebC in Eleventy context specifically. So if you're interested in WebC outside of Eleventy, I would check out the GitHub repository for that, which has its own documentation. But if you're interested in using WebC inside of Eleventy, I think the best place to start is on eleventy.dev. So we have a bunch of very comprehensive documentation about why WebC is good, why WebC can provide a lot of value to your projects, and the features in WebC and some community resources as well. Some of the things that I've already mentioned. So if you're interested in using WebC, and I would highly recommend it, I would start here with this site. And I think this is the video that kind of drove it home for most folks that were kind of on the fence about it. weren't really sure about what WebC did independent of the other heavier JavaScript frameworks that exist in the wild. And this sort of went through how to build a WebC component with client-side interactivity. So we built the quintessential button to increment a number on the page component using WebC. Yeah, and I think that that is a great starter if you're looking to understand how to do client-side interactivity in WebC. And so in the Eleventy meetup talk that we did, the video is still pending, we sort of dived deeper into that example about the different progressive enhancement strategies that can come up when you're just even building a very simple button to increment a number on the page example. And I published the source code for that as well, and you can kind of see the live demo of that. So if you're interested in seeing the full code of that example, specifically from the Eleventy meetup talk, I would check this one out. Before I close up this video for the day, I did want to just go through another quick demo about building sort of a WebC component, kind of going into a deeper point about progressive enhancement and server-side rendering. So I decided to build a sort of image slider comparison tool. And if you go out and look for existing prior art for this, you'll find this incredible blog post from Paul Hebert on the Cloud4 blog, going into how they built an accessible image comparison web component. And this is what it looks like when it's rendered. This is an amazing blog post. It's an amazing component. I would recommend checking it out if you have this use case. It's tiny, it's awesome, it's accessible. Really great job from the team here. Yeah, I love it. It's only 1.5 kilobyte. If you go to their demo site, you can see it in action. And they even have a progressive enhancement story here. And that's kind of what I want to talk about. So when you have a component like this, an image comparison component, and you disable JavaScript on it, the typical experience is that you will just stack the two images vertically. And that's documented right here in the progressive enhancement story here. If the JavaScript is slow to load or fails to load or errors or what have you, the two images will just be stacked vertically. And that's a fine experience. That's a great fallback. That's a great baseline experience to start from, because you're getting all the content. You're getting what you would expect to see, but you just aren't getting the JavaScript enhanced experience with the nice slider. But you're still seeing both images, so you're receiving the full content. And so just as a baseline experience, I think this is great. Here's another one from Shoelace, an image comparer. A lot of the same mechanisms in play here. I kind of like how this one's just like a grayscale slider. But if you go out and look here on just the code pen of this deployed example, it does the same thing with the fallback JavaScript experience. Just displays the two images vertically. And the reason this happens in the component markup, you're using just images as slots. So you're putting one image into the before slot and one image into the after slot. Yeah, when JavaScript doesn't run, it just renders those images as the fallback experience. And again, this is great. But if you have this as your primary component on your page and is subject to content layout shift measurements, that might not be what you want. So you'll notice that the slow JavaScript experience causes a big layout shift in this component. And this is just kind of a standard drawback to baseline progressive enhancement, right? You're getting all the content, but you're also getting a huge layout shift. So I kind of wanted to go through just real quickly how you can build a component like this and sort of avoid the layout shift altogether and still have a progressively enhanced baseline server rendered version. I've gone through an example here and sort of set up some code. We have just a sample compare IMG WebC component. And this is what it looks like when you're declaring it on your page. We have four different properties. The default value here, which is the percentage value, 0 to 100, how much we want that image to, or where we want the initial slider value to be. We have our left image and our right image. And then we have an alt attribute that we want to assign to those images. So yeah, this is what it looks like rendered. And the form component, or the form control here, was just an input type range, controls how much of the left image is shown versus how much of the right image is shown. This is kind of how those web components work that I already showed you. They have an image slider, which is not actually visible at all until the enhanced experience is loaded, and that is rendered inside of Shadow DOM and those other examples. So this is what the component code looks like. There's just a template. We use the, if you've watched some of the previous WebC component, the crash course and the progressively enhanced component with client-side interactivity videos that I put up, you'll note that this UID is a build time generated ID that's unique to the instance on the page. So we can use that for accessibility mapping. So we have a UID here, which is just assigns a unique ID to the component, and then we map that to the to both the ID in the slider and the form label as well. We'll use those in a couple of different places. And you can see that we have the form element here, which is the input type range. It's disabled by default. And then we have an image, two images here, one for the left and one for the right. And we're just declaring alts here. And I don't think necessarily that this is the best experience. I think that you might want to have independent alt attributes for your left and your right images. But this is just a simplified example. So we have a bunch of CSS also in play here, and we're using WebC's scoped attribute and :host to generate unique class names to the component that we can use inside of the component. And just as an example here, we have a style block. We use display grid to stack the images on top of each other visually. We use the disabled to add a cursor when the disabled cursor before the JavaScript is available. So that, you'll remember we have the disabled attribute up here by default. And then we just set 100% width to the range input. And here's the CSS that stacks the images in display grid. And here is the CSS that controls how much of the initial image is shown, how much of the left image is shown versus the right. And we just use clip path to do that. Now, if you scroll down a little bit, we do have another interesting piece here. We're using a WebC render function to generate style. So this is build time style that gets returned here. We're using the UID here to map how much of the left image is shown using a CSS custom property. And so when you have a bunch of different instances of these on the page, you'll get a bunch of different instances of this CSS appearing in your output as well. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see the JavaScript in play here. So we use our custom element compare image. We select the left image. We select the range. We remove the disabled attribute. So the form element is now interactive. And then we map an input event and then set the CSS custom property to the new value from the slider. And that's kind of how it works. If we inspect this here, and then go to our CSS, that's going to look pretty minified there, but you can kind of see that we have our ID, our UID generated here. That's setting our initial value to 60%. And then here's the instance that has an ID, and on also our scoped CSS class that has our styles here. So here's what happens when we disable JavaScript in this case. Because we're using build time CSS to generate the live view of the component, and we're using a CSS custom property to set the initial value. All that stuff is available without JavaScript. The only thing that is required for JavaScript is the event listener that changes the CSS custom property. So when JavaScript isn't available, you'll see that this form element is disabled. And not just that, but our initial value of 60% is also applied to how the component renders. So you'll see 60% of the left is visible and 40% of the right is visible. And that's all done through CSS. So for this component specifically, we don't have any content layout shift. There's no layout moving on the page in the before JavaScript and after JavaScript rendering. Now the downfall here is that for your use case, this might not be what you want, right? You may want the fallback experience to be both images shown in their entirety, or you may want the left image to show and not the right image. But I think we need to make these decisions more granularly at the component level so that we can have fine-grained control of the JavaScript and no JavaScript experiences. And we can make smarter context-aware decisions for those. So this is full SSR, right? We're doing we're doing everything that we can in the CSS, and we're just adding a very light JavaScript touch for this progressively enhanced use case. And lastly, I'll just go back here and add a couple more instances here so you can see how it works when there's a couple of different ones in play. And we'll just set the initial properties here too, maybe, I don't know, 0 and 100, so we can see how it looks. Let's zoom out here. So yeah, you can kind of see that the initial JavaScript experience, this one's 100, this one's 0. That means the left image is shown in its entirety and the right image is shown in its entirety here. And when we disable JavaScript, each of those are shown in their full server rendered modes. And if we look at the JavaScript, or excuse me, the styling that shows up in the head, you can see we have 3 different UIDs here, component UIDs, each with their own unique value. And those are mapped to each component instance. So yeah, that's another example of how to have more fine-grained control over your progressive enhancement strategy for individual components. I think you could probably get a little bit more creative here. You could probably use a range of checkboxes and maybe the new upcoming has selector to provide a functional no JavaScript experience. But until has is available everywhere, we might not go down that road yet. But again, WebC will allow you to do that when you want to do that. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions about WebC or Eleventy, and let me know how it's going. All right, keep building, y'all.